Hello, BookTube. I went to the Brattle first thing this morning. I was a little deprived because it had been raining. The Brattle is a used bookstore in the heart of downtown Boston. They're great. They have a huge turnover. The stock is always uh, changing, and that makes it a great destination for a book-hungry person. And they also have a sale lot outside the shop that's huge, thousands more books. That isn't functional when it rains. It's been raining for a few days here in Boston. That always makes me feel a little Brattle deprived. But it looks like today and tomorrow are going to be rain free. Overcast, yes. Damp, maybe a little chilly in the mornings, but I don't think rain is returning until the weekend. Uh, and I had a couple of errands to run anyway, so I went to the Brattle. I also wanted to show them the gift that one of you sent me yesterday. One of you made a tasseled bookmark for me with dogs on it, and on the other side, the Brattle will provide. This is a saying that I use about the Brattle. I've used it about them for 50 years. Because their stock is so uh, replenished, because they're constantly building and changing their stock, you see new things there literally every time you go. And I know that's true because I used to go every day. Whether it's a case of your eyes just glazed over and you missed something the last time, but now you see it clear, or whether or not it's new. Hundreds of new books out every day. Whichever of those things it is true that the stock is just in a constant state of overturn. So over the years, over the decades, when I encounter a lack, when I suddenly realize, oh, I don't have this, that, or the other thing, which happens all the time when I'm reading book reviews or I'm reading a book and something comes up, I immediately think, I had that. I put notes in it. I have pages and reviews in it. And then I look for it. It's not there. I don't have that. Happens to me all the time. And the Brattle's right there, always. Because instead of encountering that moment and just panicking and thinking, I better go online and order a copy, instead I just sit back and think, well, the Brattle will provide. This little saying right here. The Brattle will provide. Eventually, I will see it at the Brattle. I will see that thing at the Brattle. Uh, and I have to say, the books that I'm going to show you right now, quite a few of them are an ample illustration of the Brattle will provide. Quite a few of them actually illustrate that. The Brattle, the folks at the Brattle were tickled pink to see this bookmark. Uh, uh, like the first one. The other day, I got Paul Auster's new biography of Stephen Crane. Paul Auster, the novelist, who decided he wanted to research and write a biography of Stephen Crane. I don't sneer at such things at all on the part of novelists. If they wanted to get serious and write nonfiction, perfectly happy to grant them, uh, a temporary loan of credit at the Bank of Steve. If they do it with airs and pretensions, well, there are enough bad biographies out there as it is, without adding to it. But if not, if for instance Paul Auster's book on Stephen Crane is the legitimate, honest reflection of a genuine passion and preoccupation on the part of one novelist with another novelist, fine by me, absolutely fine by me. But when I was looking through that book, I was looking to see there's a particular Crane biography from almost 100 years ago now that was so definitive in its time. It has lots of shortcomings, but it was so definitive in its time that every Stephen Crane biography since then, the author has had the book open in front of him while he was writing. They just heavily rely on it to the point where you might as well just wait until that Crane biography shows up at the Brattle and read it instead. And I was curious. I was digging around in the Auster Crane book to figure out, whether or not he knows that, whether or not his book is another one that relies heavily on that particular biographer. Uh, and when I was doing that, I was thinking about a great Crane scholar who used to go on at great length about the fact that what he referred to as the deplorable state of Stephen Crane biography. This is a major American author. You'd think there'd be a ton of really good, independently wonderful books, and 50 years ago there weren't. And this particular scholar, his name was Joe Katz, and he used to go on and on about that. He was a Crane scholar himself, wrote a whole bunch of great monographs and books, edited a whole bunch of collections. And when I was reading around in the Auster Crane biography, I thought, well, Joe Katz was the editor for the Viking Portable Stephen Crane, which is a great volume to have. It's not one of the Viking portables that was put together by a buff. Instead, it was put together by one of the world's greatest experts. You get the whole of Maggie, Girl of the Streets. You get the whole of Red Badge of Courage. Tons of letters, tons of reporting, tons of shorter pieces. It's a great volume to have. And I could picture it clear as day, the paperback that I have. Has a great deal of marginalia. I remembered exactly where I got it. I remember exactly where it is. So when I was done poking around in the Auster Crane, the Auster Crane is on my reading docket for the weekend. I got up and I went to my mass market paperback shelf in order to pull down the Cat's Viking Portable Stephen Crane. It wasn't there. It wasn't there. What followed was as predictable as a Greek tragedy, where I'm moaning and going from shelf to shelf, saying, "No, no, I know I have this. I know I do." But I don't. This particular book collection that I have, this particular library, it's not like Jason's or Mark's. This is one of the smallest personal libraries that I've ever had. It doesn't take long to search every single title. So I'm not in any doubt when I'm wondering whether or not I have something, or I'm absolutely sure that I do when I don't. I'm not left in any doubt for very long, and I don't. And I I thought exactly this. I thought the Brattle will provide. And then I went this morning. One of the first things I saw was the Joseph Katz Viking Portable Stephen Crane. This is a hardcover with a dust jacket, which is just a bonus for me. I was thinking of the paperback, but this is an untouched hardcover. With Viking Portables, you want to be really careful. Make sure you check inside, because these went into schools. And so a lot of them are heavily marked up. But this is perfect. And there you go. That's a perfect example of the Brattle will provide. As is this next one. I was talking about this book. What was it? Oh, right. Jim at Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff is doing his alphabet tag, and he got all the way to the letter W, the last easy letter of the alphabet. And one of the prompts was world. And he asked you to name your favorite book about circumnavigating the world. And I mentioned Sir Francis Chichester, who did a great book, one of the great classics of nautical literature, Gypsy Moth Sails the World. And I was making the answers to that tag. I was getting ready to make that video. And I was thinking, well, okay, I have a little mass market paperback of Gypsy Moth Sails the World, and I know exactly where it is. And see if you could finish this for me. I looked, and I don't have it. I didn't have it. I knew this before I made the tag, that I don't have a copy of Gypsy Moth Sails the World, even though it's an absolute classic, a revisitable classic. And so I thought, the Brattle will provide, and they did. so I now have a nice classic hardcover copy of Gypsy Moth Sails the World. There is our author with 0% body fat, sluicing himself down. You got to be a little bit careful when you're doing that. You want to give a wash down with water, just bucket that you pull up over the side, but you want to be careful when you do that. You don't want to splash a Man of War onto yourself. You don't want to splash a jellyfish onto yourself, because they'll sting you, and you're far, far away from help. Then this next one is a book that I have had before. I really enjoy it. I was glad to find a hardcover at the Brattle this morning. This is not a case of the Brattle will provide, because I wasn't really thinking about this, although I should have been, because a new book on this subject is coming out next year. This is by Peter McDonough, and this is Men Astutely Trained. This is his book about the Jesuits. Really, really readable. Really, really good. Much, much better, for instance, than Malachi Martin's book on the Jesuits. Much, much better. And there's a new book about the Jesuits coming out. So I saw that in a listing. I think I saw it in a catalog somewhere, and I immediately thought of this thing. I didn't get so far as to actually formulate the Brattle will provide. I didn't actually think, oh, I probably want that. I didn't even get that far. I didn't have enough time to get that far. The Brattle already gave me a copy. Fantastic. Also, these things were free because one of you called in a gift card to the Brattle. Very, very nice. One of you called in gift credit at the Brattle. You people do that on a regular basis. I really, really appreciate it. The one thing you know is that you will get a video out of it like this. I always tell people, just call the Brattle Bookshop in downtown Boston. You can just tell them, I want to swear out credit for Steve. A lot of times you won't even have to use my last name. They'll know who you're talking about. Oh, it's a gas-powered leaf blower. my arch nemesis. Well, anyway, we're going to move on. This next one is a hardcover with a dust jacket and also one of those Mylar library covers of a book that we've seen on this channel. I think I've hauled this a couple of times. And every time I do, one of you says you want it. So I've mailed it out as many times as I've got it. This is John Julian Norwich. This is Paradise of Cities, his book about Venice in the 19th century. And it's a lovely thing. It's got deckled edges and lovely Venetian pattern end papers. And it's all about Venice at a time when Venice was first learning how to be Venice in the modern era. Full of big names. Painters, Henry James, of course, a whole bunch of historians. I love the way this author writes, and I don't want to be without this book. As soon as I saw it, I realized, well, no, you've sent away every copy that you have. But now I have one with a really nice dust jacket, so that's great. Then this next one, some of you will have noticed that David Murphy has returned among us. And he wants to do Nonfiction November, of course, because Olive, Edibook Olive, rules all. She is the one ring to bind us all. And her big event, Nonfiction November, is right around the corner. And David Murphy thought, wouldn't it be fun to do a read-along of a nonfiction work for Nonfiction November? So he picked a book. Now, he picked a book on Nazi Germany, because he's a huge fan of World War II, as am I. I think World War II is legitimately the most dramatic and important historical subject anywhere in the history of humans. And it's within living memory. There are people alive who participated in it. I think that's just incredible. I think not to study World War II invokes the same kind of scorn as if you were to look back on the Peloponnesian War and realize there were and think about a person who decided, that an avid reader who decided not to read about the war. It would be it's mystifying to me. I have a whole half a bookcase of books on World War II. And David picked a book that I have read. I have reviewed it. It's James Holland's book, The Rise of Germany, the first book in his War in the West trilogy that is unfinished. And I saw David's announcement video, and I breathed a sigh of relief. The book he chose was not Wages of Destruction. Wages of Destruction is also a Nazi Germany World War II book, but it's all about the economy of Nazi Germany, and I was expecting that he was not only going to pick that, but then bore our eye teeth out of our heads with talking about the fine points of Nazi economy. Fortunately, for some odd reason, he did not choose Wages of Destruction. Instead, he chose The Rise of Germany, and I thought, well, that's great. I liked the book very, very much. I happily reread it, and once again, say it with me now. I thought, I know exactly where the book is. It's with my World War II books. I will make sure to pull my copy off the shelf, and it wasn't there. And it wasn't there. It wasn't there. So I had to grab a copy at the Brattle. I had to grab a copy. This is the book. I'll leave a link to David's channel down below. He's doing a read-along of this for November. It's broken up into 4 parts, so it'll be nice and congenial. This is really, really good stuff. It's well-trod ground. A lot of you will be familiar with Richard Evans. He did a book on the coming of the Third Reich that is same years, same study, a lot of the same documents. You get the impression when you read the 2 books in close proximity that Evans no sooner left the study carrel at a particular library or research center than Holland showed up with his bag. But this is a read-along for November. We're having a whole... I want to do a whole bunch of nonfiction read-alongs for Nonfiction November. But I had to get the book because I didn't have it. And the same thing's true for this next one. I mentioned it the other day. Why did I mention it? Why did I mention it? Oh, right. There was a piece in, I think, the TLS. Yes, Peter Parker, the author of Houseman Country, did a great essay on E.M. Forster's explicitly gay novel, Morris, which Forster did not publish in his lifetime. He was afraid of what would happen if he did. Legally, to him, he was afraid of what would happen. He circulated it in Samizdat form to his friends and all sorts of other people, but he didn't publish it. And I loved the piece by Peter Parker. So I cut it out and I dated it and I clipped it and trimmed it. And I thought I'll put it in my Penguin Classic of Morris. And I don't have a Penguin Classic of Morris. I don't have the novel at all in any format. So I thought, okay. Don't know how that happened, but I'll certainly have a copy of Morris down the line. So I'll put this in my copy of Howard's End. And I went for my Penguin Classic copy of Howard's End, and I don't have it. I don't have a Penguin Classic copy of Howard's End. So I was horrified. This is one of my favorite modern authors. So I thought, okay, well, I've got the review just in my hand, like Doofus Maloofus. So I have the Norton Critical edition of Howard's End. I'll put it in that. Went to my Norton Critical shelf. No Norton Critical Howard's End. Don't have any Howard's End of any format. I don't have the book except in e-format. I still had the clipped review. So I thought, well, okay, this is horrible, and you really need to get all of E.M. Forster. But in the meantime, you can put this in Furbank's biography of E.M. Forster, a great biography, one of the great writer biographies of the 20th century. You don't have to worry about that. Didn't have it. I didn't have it. So now I do. Okay, now I found a copy of Furbank's biography of E.M. Forster. He is great. He did a biography of Dennis Diderot that is also really great, but this is much, much better. This is incredibly good. And the Brattle provided. Thank God. So all of these things were shocks to the system that I just had to fix at the Brattle. And then these last two are going to be, I have a bookcase that's dedicated to collected reviews, collected prefaces, my life in publishing, love of books, books about books is basically that whole bookcase. And I found two examples of that I have had in the past and liked both times. I don't have them now, so I grabbed them right away. And the first one is an anthology. This is by Ronald Schwartz, and it's For the Love of Books, where he contacted a whole bunch of authors and asked them to write about the handful of books that formed them, that were formative for them. And his introductory preface to this book is wonderful. It really makes you wish that the whole book were just his writing. He goes on about all the various answers that he got from authors, how some of them said, this is torture, or I can't do this, or I'll gladly do this, or all the different answers that he got. And it's very interesting to see. There's a whole bunch, the back has a whole bunch of the authors, Diane Ackerman, Dave Barry, John Barth, Ann Beatty, Penelope Fitzgerald, Tracy Kidder, Elmore Leonard, Doris Lessing, Frank McCourt, Arthur Miller, Joyce Carol Oates, of course, Cynthia Ozick, Robert Parker, a whole bunch of different people here. And it's interesting. I loved this book. Every time I've had it, I've loved it. And as soon as I saw it at the Brattle today, I realized I don't have a copy, but I have room for it now. So it will go on the Books About Books bookcase. And so will this next one. Pretty much the only thing by this author that I have ever liked. This is A History of Reading by Alberto Manguel. Who's never really done it for me. Alberto Manguel is one of a cadre of popular public intellectuals that seem to me to write stuff that really needs a playbook to understand. For me, it was always a holy trinity. It was Umberto Eco, Roberto Colasso, and Alberto Manguel. All of them were writing these kinds of vaporware books, and I know that I'm wrong about that. I know that is a fun negative impression. I would have known that anyway, but then Jason Harrigan went on and on his late lamented channel about Foucault's Pendulum, his favorite book, by Eco. And I know that Mark Richardson, on his late lamented channel, the OGBG is dropping like flies here. But Mark went on and on about how he loves Colasso. Roberto Colasso is a favorite author of his. So I know there's stuff there. If I encounter those kinds of readers and they like those kinds of authors, then my first assumption is that I am wrong, not that they are wrong. This is more controlled Manguel. This is about the history of reading. A lot of it is potted. I think a lot of it was probably written by assistants. Interesting stuff, and full of anecdotes anyway. And the beginning part, which is about his history of reading, what I wouldn't give if this were my history of reading, by Alberto Manguel. What I wouldn't give if that were true. It would be 10 times more interesting for me. And then the end parts. The end parts of the book also get more personal. And it's full of little quotes and witticisms about books and reading. So it was free thanks to the generosity of one of you calling in a store credit. So I grabbed it. Of course I did. But these last two weren't the Brattle will provide. I wasn't really looking for these things. I'm just happy to have them now that I have room for them. And there you go. It's coincidental that I have The Brattle Will Provide as a new bookmark when this was a perfect example of The Brattle providing. Not these two, History of Reading and For the Love of Books. Very happy to have these two, very companionable titles, but not them, but pretty much everything else. The Furbank biography of E.M. Forster. Yeah, wanted a copy, realized I didn't have it, told myself The Brattle Will Provide. The Rise of Germany by James Holland, who has a new book coming out in November. Yeah, want a copy, Want to join in the read-along. Didn't have one. Needed the Brattle to provide. Paradise of Cities, not really so much so, because I've had this many times before. Every time I get a copy, I send it out. But I'm holding on to this one. So if one of you wants this, I'm going to have to wait till I find another copy to send to you. I'm holding on to this one because it's in perfect condition, and I'm rough on my stuff. Then Men Astutely Trained, one of the only exceptions to the rule today, a book that I wasn't particularly looking for, but I am very glad to have it. Or maybe on some subconscious level, I was thinking the Brattle will provide. I know that I thought about this book the minute I saw the listing for the new book coming out about a history of the Jesuits. So maybe on some subconscious level, I was thinking that. I was definitely thinking about this. Gypsy Moth Circles the World. I was definitely thinking about the Brattle will provide for this. I didn't know it would happen right away, but I'm glad that it did. And finally, the Viking Portable Stephen Crane. Another thing that I was amazed that I didn't have it. I was mortified, and now I do. So a very successful trip to the Brattle, full of things that I'm hoping not to get rid of again. And now what I have to do, I'll clean these things up. I have to reinforce a couple of them. And then I have to find that Peter Parker TLS essay. I don't know where it ended up. I need to find it and put it in the Furbank, in the Furbank A.M. Forster volume. I swear, the trials never end here at Hyde Cottage. But fortunately, the video will end, so I'm going to wrap this up. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.